When you're in the middle of a medical storm, it can feel like your identity is slipping away. But what if sharing your most painful moments is actually the key to reclaiming your story? Today, we're talking about turning pain into purpose with a special guest. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Brain On podcast. In today's episode, we have a special interview feature that I'm really excited to share with you. This is a bit of a time capsule. We actually recorded this interview last year during a challenging season in which Thomas and I were waiting for the results of one of his scans. And during that time of waiting, we found so much comfort in an article written about our journey by the Night Cancer Institute. The author took our medical challenges and reflected them back to us as what it truly was, a love story. Seeing our cancer battle through someone else's eyes was profoundly healing. It reminded us that, as Brené Brown says, your story will be someone's survival guide. The man who wrote that article is our special guest today, Dustin Hawes, the social media manager at the Night Cancer Institute. We talk about why people choose to share their most vulnerable moments and how externalizing this can help you find purpose. While this recording is from our past, the message has never been more relevant because Thomas and I have recently taken our own advice and put our story out into the world in a way that we will be sharing about in a future episode. So more to come there. But for now, let's dive into our episode interview. Hey everyone, I'm so glad you're tuning in today. I have the pleasure of being joined by Dustin with the Night Cancer Institute. Dustin, thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and kind of what
Absolutely.
brought you to the Night Cancer Institute and how you're here today?
When anybody talks about their career path, it's never point A to point B. It's always a long, winding road with a bunch of different detours. And I've always been obsessed with sports, and I did like marketing when I took some of those classes. And
And you have a podcast.
yes, Holy Backboard is a Trailblazers themed podcast. And somebody from the digital team of the Blazers came to our sports marketing group at Portland State. And he was like, hey, if you ever need anything, message me on Facebook. It's like, okay, shot my shot, as they say, and I got an internship, which led to a 5-year stint with the Portland Trailblazers managing their social media. That was kind of perfect timing. Like nothing could ever have planned for that. That's when social media became a big thing for brands to be on. And then I moved to the agency side, focusing on travel and tourism to kind of get a little bit of a work-life balance back. Being in a sports landscape, you're always on 24/7. Something could happen. Even in the off season, there's a lot of planning and work to be done. So I just was looking to get a little bit of my time back. And then, 5 years with the agency, I was like, I'm kind of getting a little burnt out with social media, but you're also at that point, you're like, this is all I've done. So I don't really know if I have it in me to do a complete 180 on a career path. So I stuck with social media. I knew it, but I was like, how can I make an impact? Like I've wanted to go into radiology, but I knew that wasn't for me. But how can I use social media to help people? And as fate would have it, one of my coworkers at the agency, she's no longer with OHSU, but she was there for about 10 years. She's like, hey, I work at Dornbecker. I'm on the social team. Her name was Lisa, and I'd worked with her for just a week at the agency before she left for OHSU. She's like, "Hey, we have an opening for the Night Cancer Institute. Would you be interested?" And I was like, "Absolutely." And so, I got an interview and I got the job. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. You're able to slow down and talk about all of the wonderful people that we have here at the Institute, all of the wonderful research that they're doing, and connect with patients and amplify their stories. They may want to tell their story for a variety of reasons. So it's my duty to put that into the best words that I know how, put a lot of time, love, and care into that, and then amplify that on our social media channels. And I really have found, it's my 5th year here, a lot of fulfillment in what I do. And so I think that's kind of what I was looking for. It allows me to have a really good work-life balance. I have a new son, 2 years old, I have a wife, and it's just nice to have your time. You're fulfilled at work, but you also have your time at home, and you're not constantly just like having to choose between work and family. And so that's really at this point in my career is what I was looking for. And so, it's a very long-winded answer, but I think if you ask anybody where they're at now and where they started, it's just going to be that's their own path. I don't think you can duplicate that. And everyone took their own special path. I think that's kind of what's so fascinating about our journeys here.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And that brings to mind for me the way that we met, which was through social media. Thomas and I started posting about our healing journey, which made me think about, we all take our different paths, as you mentioned, with careers. We were starting to share the journey that we were on and talk about the trials and the beautiful things that we were observing as we went through this healing journey that was being done at the Night Cancer Institute. And it was neat. We made that connection over social media. So, can you tell me a little bit more about what happened from there? You saw us starting to post things, and it kind of had a intersection with what patient stories you had kind of already been doing.
Like everyone wants to tell a patient story. That's kind of like the best thing that we can do. Sometimes you get providers that say, hey, I've got this awesome patient. It's also really, really groundbreaking research. We would love to get that story. Other times, and this is probably the majority of the times, is people take the initiative on their own and share their story on social media and they go out and they tag us. So whenever we are tagged, usually on Instagram, I become aware of it. And then it's like, yeah, whether it's a 2,000 word article or it's just, a reshare, like it doesn't matter the amount of words that go into it. It's just I think the thoughtfulness that somebody wanted me to see that post, right? When people tag the night on Instagram or any social platform, I get all of the notifications. It's very easily to pop into a direct message to say, thank you for sharing about your experience. I would love to further share your story. And if you would be comfortable with that, there are a couple of hurdles to go over, whether it's a HIPAA or a media release form, but then we can take those next steps into, further amplifying that journey and that story.
I think the neat thing about that, Dustin, is at least for us, when we heard that you reached out and you wanted to connect and do this article, it was very honoring just knowing that our story had been elevated and that you wanted to share it. It brought us a lot of joy. And we just felt honored to have that collaboration with the Night Cancer Institute. And I was curious, what are some of the most powerful or maybe even emotionally poignant stories that you've had the opportunity to share with patients as you've in some way, shape, or form connected with them? What are some of those maybe powerful ones that you've come across?
I think it's just the difference in why people are wanting to share their story. And it's also the simplicity of the story as well. Cancer is so complex, the journeys can be so rigorous. But at the end of the day, when I go back and I look at some of the stories that I've wrote and the quotes that the patients have provided, it comes down to like an overarching theme of how can I enjoy today? Like, what are little things that I can do to accomplish to make me feel good? Whether that's I got out of bed and I took a shower, or I'm going to go work in my garden, right? Or I want to spend as much time with my grandchild as possible, right? These are little wins that mean the world to folks, and they are positioning themselves mentally to attain those. And so it's just those little daily tasks that I think people take for granted a lot of the times. And it kind of puts everything into perspective. And you go back to why people want their story shared. I've had people mention that, I have breast cancer. I want to make sure people are going out there and scheduling their mammograms. They're doing salt checks. They're aware about it. One person got a rare type of lung cancer because they had radon in
Mm.
present in their basement while they were working out and wanted to become an advocate for radon research because radon is really prevalent in the state of Oregon. And so that's another way that we're able to amplify that and bring that knowledge to people that they may not be aware about. And then you also get people who are connected with cancer. They may not be the patient, but a loved one is going through it currently. And so I've had people who are photographers and they sell calendars of their work and they take the proceeds and they donate it to the Neck Cancer Institute. I've worked with somebody who is a musical artist and they put on, concerts, and because their grandmother and mother received care at the night, they then donate those proceeds to the Neck Cancer
Wow.
Institute. So you see that the impact that cancer has on the patient and their loved ones and how people really decide how they're going to like accept like this is what they're handling and how they handle it, right? And it's so powerful because it's such a big burden, yet it just puts things into perspective how people handle it. And it doesn't matter if you handle it with grace or not. Like, there's no right or wrong way to handle it. And it's just very inspiring to hear their stories. It's very, like you mentioned, it's honoring to be able to tell their stories. In a way, it's a little selfish, I think, for me to reach out because I am getting something out of it, right? I'm getting to tell a story, but I'm also asking somebody to rehash something,
Mm.
and they are going that step and telling me that story because and they are making a sacrifice by telling me that
Yes.
story, right? And so I really I don't take that for granted.
Appreciate you sharing that. It makes me think of the work of Tina Payne Bryson, who's a great researcher in cognitive psychology. And she talks about the power of creating a cohesive narrative when someone's able to reflect on their life, be it childhood or throughout their adult life, and think about, okay, what's been happening to me? What, adversities have I gone through? And then kind of make sense of it. So when you are sitting down with folks and inviting them to share their story with you, you are probably stirring up some feelings, and yet it's also providing them a safe space to process and think through it a little bit within the context of, I want to share my story and how can this have a positive influence, whether it's, sharing information like you mentioned about going and getting mammograms or being mindful about the environments that we're in. I think it's really neat for people to have that space to do something like that. Can you think of or share a specific instance where a story that you shared had a significant impact on the audience, or maybe the individual featured, or where someone shared how that story was moving or impactful to them?
Yeah, I mentioned sharing about the patient who was diagnosed with lung cancer from the radon. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
clear. It's pretty likely that that was the case, that it was the radon poisoning. And we shared the story, and somebody on Instagram commented, thank you for sharing this. I'm going to get my basement checked right now. Right. And so
Yes.
even if it's just one person that is checking their basement, job complete, right? Like one
Mhm.
is enough. Obviously, you want everyone to possibly do it, but that's awesome that the story by the patient telling me the story and using our channels to amplify that message, reach someone that are like they took that next step to go through it. And I think all of the stories that we share have a really positive impact on our community. There was a patient who wanted to and completed a trek in Argentina, and he trained and also did that trek with what's called an HAI pump, and it
Okay.
basically had the chemo going directly into his stomach, and he accomplished that. And I think you can't hear that and not be inspired. It just makes you realize sometimes how little and minuscule maybe like your problem was, like, oh, I'm upset with a coworker, or oh, somebody like, is tailgating me really hard right now. It really kind of helps reset and just like, okay, just take a deep breath and
Mm.
understand that there are bigger things out there.
Perspective is something that you mentioned, and that's what Thomas and I have found, that having this cancer journey and this experience in our life, it's given us so much perspective, just how fragile life is, and just really appreciating everything that you have. As we're living across the street from OHSU at the Rood Family Pavilion, we're in a different season of life, and a lot of our life is filled with appointments, and we're receiving such excellent care. And also, we're going to be so grateful for those little moments when we get to go home and, be with our cat again and just kind of go back to a normal rhythm of life. So I think perspective is really huge. What is that like when you share things from the medical standpoint, coming from our medical providers at Night Cancer Institute? Any insights from that demographic as well?
Yeah, I really appreciate working with the providers, just understanding how busy they are, and that they want to take the time out to explain something to me. Like if I need something in layman's terms, like the HAI pump, we had meetings and we discussed, and every time I write a story, it not only goes to the patient, but if a provider is also referenced or featured or the treatment plan is detailed, it goes to them as well. So, I'm really thankful for their expertise and their time to look over it because one, we want to be telling the most accurate story possible. But two, I think it's just another level of care that goes into sharing the stories.
And finally, one of my last questions for you is, what is the most rewarding aspects of sharing stories with cancer patients, or the part of your job that's really rewarding?
When I put something on, not paper, because it's not paper, when I type something out after going through interviews and edits, and I present my interpretation of someone's story that they shared with me, and they were vulnerable with me, and I took that. And when they're like, wow, like this is amazing. Like I just get such a big boost from that because I put a lot of time and effort and care into the stories. I'm a long process writer. Sometimes it takes a while for me to figure out the angle that I want to share a story because as I mentioned, like cancer is complex and you could write 10,000 words about every single story and there still would be more to uncover. So there's, a line between too much information, but you really want to give it the grace and put enough, I guess, meat on the bone, right? And so there's always that balance of information, but when you're able to kind of thread that needle between the two while also making the patient feel validated, right? Feel valued because like they spent their time rehashing their story and, speaking about, something major in their life with you. And for them to be like, yeah, this was awesome. This was worth it. Thank you so much. Those are the moments for me. I'm like, okay, everything was worth it because it is a lot of time and care. And so to see that kind of payoff at the end, that's where it's like, you're really excited. I love doing that.
That's wonderful. So great, both for, the patients as they see their story visually, and then also for you as you're interacting with that information in their story as well. So thank you so much for sharing, Dustin, about what you do. And do you have any final thoughts or things that you'd like to share with our audience?
Thank you for having me on. Like this is a really cool kind of feather in my cap, so to speak, as somebody who runs social media at the Net Cancer Institute. Like I'm usually the one featuring other, providers or employees or patients, and so to kind of have it kind of reversed it is really neat. And so, I just appreciate everything that both you and Thomas do. It's so wonderful. It's been just great to get to know both of you too, and I'm excited to share your story.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing it as well. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Lindsay.
I'm so grateful for that conversation and for the profound gift that he gave Thomas and me by writing our story with such empathy and care. Listening back to this interview with Dustin reminds me of a quote from Diane Callahan, a 4-time cancer survivor. She said, "There is healing in helping people in their own struggles. We have to give purpose to the hard things, because if hard things don't happen in our lives, we won't grow, and we won't learn how to accept help or be givers of help." Oh, I love that. I love that quote. She was interviewed by the Blood Cancer United podcast. It was really impactful. And I love when I heard that from her for the first time. Healing and helping people in their struggle. If you're listening to this and you're thinking about sharing your own story, I would love to give you a piece of advice that I learned when preparing for a TED Talk. It was a TED education talk. And I got to do this several years ago. And one of the things we learned in our class was about the power of finding your through line. And this is, what is the one big message that you want people to take away from your experience? My mom gave me a beautiful picture for this. She had said that our lives are like weaving a grand tapestry. We can't always see the big picture or how our stories will weave together, but we can trust that they do. So start small, maybe share with a friend, find your through line, and see how your story can touch someone else's heart. But what if you are on the other side of that conversation, right? Someone sharing their story with you. The act of listening can be just as powerful as the act of sharing. If someone is bravely sharing their medical journey or really any journey with you, I want to remind you of Brené Brown's incredible teachings on empathy. Empathy is a choice, and to avoid what she calls an empathy miss, there's 4 things that you can focus on. Number 1 is be present. Don't try to fix the problem. Your presence is the most powerful thing that you can offer. Number 2, validate their experience. A simple "I believe you" or "thank you for sharing that" goes a long way. Number 3, connect with the feeling and not the circumstance. You may have never had cancer before, but you have felt fear and sadness. You can connect with that feeling. And finally, lead with curiosity. Ask them what they need. Ask them what purpose they found from that, if it feels appropriate for the conversation, and maybe see how you can elevate their story as well, like Dustin did for us. If you have found value in today's episode, the best way you can support this community is by leaving a quick review on Apple Podcasts Or if you want to share a piece of your story with me, you can use the text us or voicemail feature right there in the show notes on your favorite podcast app, and we would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for holding space for our story and for tuning in to the Brain It On podcast. I'll talk with you soon.